Please listen. I don't have much time before they come back. You are listening to the Be Very Afraid podcast, where Jacob and Meaghan chat about all things horror, whether it be a horror classic, new age box office bomb, TV show, or anything else horror related. Join us in sharing thoughts about all our favorite and least favorite horror moments. I have to go. I can hear them coming back for me. I hope you enjoy the show. Hi, listeners and watchers on YouTube. My name is Jacob. I have Meaghan here with me. We are starting a new podcast called Be Very Afraid Podcast. So the first topic that we're kind of talking about today is the movie Trick or Treat. Do you want to get into a little bit of the history?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm Meaghan. So Trick or Treat, fantastic movie. Production was completed in 2007. So to kind of set us back to that time, that was when Saw 4 came out, and it was originally supposed to be released that same weekend, but they pulled it. And then kept pushing and pushing release dates to theaters so long that they actually ended up just releasing it straight to DVD in 2009. So the director is Michael Dougherty, and he based the movie off of his 1996 animated short film Season's Greetings. If you haven't watched it and you have seen Trick or Treat, stop what you're doing, go watch it. We don't want to ruin it for you.
Super cute.
It's so cute.
And it was
so
actually,
dark.
yes, yeah. I say super cute, but dark things are cute to me, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, no. Well, and that's one of the things that we said we would talk about is how cute Sam is.
Yes.
So if you've seen the movie before, you know that Sam is our little burlap sack.
Pumpkinhead burlap sack demon.
Yeah. Well, this short film is all about Sam in an animated version. And what's interesting to me is how many homages, I mean, there weren't that many, but like how obvious the homages were to the short film when you go back and rewatch Trick or Treat, because the first thing I noticed was how Sam was carrying his bag and dragging it across the ground, just like in the opening scene of the film. And then you've got that alleyway, which we'll talk about, that looming dark figure, which again comes up in Trick or Treat, and an attack on an innocent. But it turns out that Sam is not so innocent. He is actually a deity based off of the Celtic holiday. I'm going to say this wrong.
Samhain.
Samhain.
I think Samhain. I was like, M's silent, and it's not Hain.
No.
Everybody was saying it with a W, so I was like, okay, I'm just going to pretend that it's spelled that way. Samhain.
Yes, Samhain. But it's spelled Samhain.
Yes.
So Sam is short for Samhain.
Yeah, I liked that he talked about in several of his interviews and stuff about it, like how we have Santa Claus for Christmas and, you know, Cupid for Valentine's Day, like all of these mascots, Leprechaun for St. Patrick's Day.
Pilgrims.
Yes. And Halloween never really had like a dedicated mascot, and that's what Sam is. So it's perfect.
Yes. And he's an adorable mascot.
Yes.
He's terrifying.
Super adorably terrifying, and kind of encapsulates like the childishness of the holiday, but also tying in that the terrifying aspect of horror and scariness and all of the legends and lore of Halloween.
Yes. And that was one thing that I really appreciated about this as a fellow Scream fan, was that there was this emphasis on rules.
Yes.
And that you had to follow certain rules in order for Sam not to exact some sort of punishment on you. And also interesting to me was how they set out the rules for us in the credits, which we may be getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but the credits are done in like a comic book style, right? And if you look at the cast, so many of them have been in Marvel movies.
Oh yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, he was like even, which I don't know DC is Superman, but he like was the director I think for
Yes.
Superman Returns.
Hmm.
So like it's funny that all of these superhero like characters and then Marvel characters for sure. I think um
Well,
Wilkins,
Anna Paquin was fresh off of X-Men.
X-Men, yes. Wilkins was in two of the Spider movie,
Hmm.
I think Spider-Man movies. Yeah, there was like several people that have worked on and starred in superhero movies in general, Marvel, DC.
Yeah. There's just a lot of really cool tie-ins with this, and that could all be
Yes.
coincidence with the Marvel stuff, but it's just a little detail that, like, to me, just felt really special.
Yeah.
And I mean, Anna Paquin at that point, I think, was probably one of the bigger names, the
Hmm.
most recognizable names, especially because X-Men
Right.
had just, come out a few years before.
And yeah, she
And
was kind of like right on that upward swing of kind of getting
yeah.
popular and her name out there.
And so in 2008, just to give a little timeline, is when True Blood actually started
Hmm.
airing. So by the time that this DVD was released, Anna Paquin was really a household name.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that because I was in graduate school by that time. So I hadn't even seen it. It had been a good 2 years that it had been out on DVD.
Hmm.
And I just didn't know it existed. So when I
Right.
first watched it, I was like, of course they got Anna Paquin. She's so popular and blah blah. Well, come to find out, I mean, I was barely a college freshman when they were set to release this.
Right. Right. Yeah. It
So
was like right after her first initial kind of bump
yeah,
in fame and movies and stuff. And then it was before True Blood, which is really what blew her up, is
big
True
time.
Blood. And I mean, no wonder because that is an amazing show.
I haven't watched it.
Oh my gosh, you haven't? Yeah,
I
you
know.
have to.
It's
That'll
one
be
of
a good
those
one
things that
though.
I've always meant to binge. Well, I'm pretty sure maybe it was either True Blood or Vampire Diaries. Obviously, the early aughts were like the time for vampires.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure one of my sorority sisters was an extra in a True Blood episode, though.
That's cool.
I know, I
That is
know.
awesome.
It might
I'm
have been
jealous.
Vampire Diaries. Courtney, I'm sorry if I got it wrong.
Yeah, no. Vampire Diaries and another one.
Oh, I love
Like,
Nina Dobrev.
oh my god. Yes, same.
As a
You're a Degrassi
Degrassi
fan.
stan,
Yes,
yes.
yes,
We'll
yeah.
have to do Degrassi of the Dead.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, that was always my favorite. Like I
All right.
wasn't ever a diehard Degrassi
Oh,
person, but I know you are.
I know.
But I like that episode was like
So good.
yes.
It's actually scary. All
Yeah.
right, I digress. I'm getting us
Yeah.
totally off track. Should we start with the very opening scene?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
So right off the bat, we have I think it was Emma and Henry,
Yes.
the
Oh wait,
couple.
but before that, there you get
Mhm.
your little trick or treat safety video where it talks about it's something that they would have
Right.
shown in like the 1980s or something.
Right.
And they say there are people out there that want to hurt you. And it just reminded
Yes.
me so much of like um the scare that we get every year about somebody's putting razor blades in the apples and they're
Hmm.
poisoning the candy, which we know the only time that's ever really happened was a father doing it to his son.
Yes, his
It's
own kid.
never been a stranger thing.
Right.
But in this movie, it is.
It is. It's very. Of course, they're going to play on these urban legends, which
Yes.
is awesome.
And I still love it because part of it is about, the traditions of Halloween are sort of urban legends in themselves. So
Right.
it works.
It does.
Everything works in this movie, at least for me. All right.
Same.
So after that,
Yes. After that, so we have Emma and Henry. So of course their yard is filled with all of these Halloween decorations, and Emma's kind of a party pooper.
she's
Um,
the Grinch of Halloween, is
Literally,
what I wrote
yes,
down.
yes. Like yeah, I didn't like her for that fact. But yeah, she is like all partied out, I guess, from the festival that they were attending, and she's dressed up as a robot, which is probably one of the reasons why she's all partied out. And
Yeah.
because like why would you pick
You can't negotiate. And I think there's a scene later on where she shows up in the background and somebody like bumps into her.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Um,
At yeah, actually at the festival, yeah. And this is kind of the part where we get like the first one of the earlier rules,
Yeah.
and that's not to blow out the candle in the pumpkin before the night is over. So
Exactly. Which also, like, it's been a long time since I've actually gotten to go party on Halloween proper. This year probably would have been the first year in a long time, but
right. Here we are.
if it were me and I was out at one of those festivals dressed up, it's the end of the night, like, who actually stays outside and takes down all of their decorations the night of the holiday?
Right.
Plus, we kind of get like a foreshadowing that it's objectively an unsafe thing for her to do, is to stand out there by herself in the dark when people are around wearing masks. And we kind of get a red herring with that kid who's got the mask on.
Yeah, it's like a Halloween moment. He's standing there
Yeah.
watching her. Like
Right.
Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween moment where he's standing
Of
there
course.
watching her with a mask on, and she's just kind of like,
Uh,
oh no.
but we figure out it's a red herring. He pulls it off. His friend pulls up in the car, like, and we're all safe, right? Of course.
Yes. So she goes on to, start cleaning up and tells him to go inside and put on the movie.
Oh God.
Oh, sick.
That was like such a gratuitous, like, it was not needed. That was the only part for me that was not needed. But I mean, I get the plot device that they use, because he falls asleep and then eventually it wakes him back up.
Yeah.
So
I also like how she pointed out, like, we're both, I think she might have said lit, we're both lit or something like that. I'm like, neither of you are acting drunk at all. And she's like all like complaining, like, oh, my mom's gonna die tomorrow when she comes over and sees all of this stuff up. And I'm like, so obviously she hates Halloween because her mom must hate Halloween, so it's just passed down. Like, what's wrong with you people?
Where is your spirit?
Best holiday
Also,
all year.
Is she from Warren Valley? Because this is where it takes place, and we'll get into this a little bit more. But up here, I think Warren Valley is based off of an actual town in Ohio that does this.
I think so, because they said there was a festival, even though I think the actual festival was filmed in like Toronto during one of their festivals, but I think
like
it was based off of
Oktoberfest?
based off of an actual festival. And yeah, of course, it being Ohio, like, we can talk more about that, of course, because Ohio is like Midwest people love Halloween and love fall
and love drinking
drinking, yes,
partying.
Give us an excuse to dress up and go get drunk
and just be ridiculous.
We're there, like, no questions asked. But yeah.
Oh yeah, and treats too. You can't forget treats. We love to eat.
Yes. Yeah. Especially in the fall and winter. But yes, so of course this is when she starts cleaning up more, and
she did blow out the candle on the jack-o'-lantern before she even started cleaning up. So already we know she's on a hit list.
And I forgot to mention that it was funny because you see the viewpoint from Sam, and when she blows it out, you literally hear him go, like,
yes,
how dare she do that?
I can't believe she did that.
Like, oh. And I couldn't tell if it was like out of excitement, but
cute Sam's voice is.
Like, they had to get the most adorable child to play Sam.
Fun fact. We see the actor that plays Sam a little bit later, and I'll tell you when. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Bring that up.
I will.
Cool. Yeah. But his little like gasp, which is either out of excitement or like disgust.
Yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, Sam, same, because like
Grinch.
Yeah. Grinch. And so she goes on to send hubby inside, and she starts cleaning up everything. And then the first kill happens.
Yes.
And she gets attacked by Sam and underneath a white sheet.
Which, can I just say, the way that they did all of the kill scenes is so masterful, because one of the, I think I learned this in either 8th grade or 10th grade in some class or another. The most effective horror is what you don't see. And I think we talk about this a lot on TV shows that talk about horror films, specifically when you're talking about Jaws, and that opening scene in Jaws where you don't see anything happen. You just know something bad is happening. And like, you don't actually see her get murdered, but it's still so grotesque.
Yes. 'Cause you see the blood splatter on the white, but you don't
Yeah.
actually, it's not overly gory to where like you're seeing like her actual
Mhm.
throat like cut open and bleeding out and everything like that. You see the action like start, but then it kind of cuts to the white sheet and just the blood just getting
Yeah.
splattered across it. And the of course the three kids standing there like,
Uh,
what just happened, and they
right.
run
Get
off.
away.
So I love that. So I love gore, but at the same time, like these kind of movies where they play it so perfectly and
Mhm.
it's not like super overly gory and it leaves
No.
some to that imagination, like love it. It
And I
was
think it would fundamentally change the movie if we did see it.
right,
It's not
right,
meant to be gore. It's not really meant to be like a hostel or a saw.
right. It's playful. It plays the fear up, I think, a little bit, even though it's still like playful enough to where you're probably still smiling through it. At least
Yeah.
I smile through it.
Well, she deserved it.
Yeah, yeah. She's definitely one you're kind of like, okay, like whatever,
All
like
right, fine.
yeah, cool.
And I
Glad that
will say
happened.
that most of the people that end up getting killed, like they didn't just break the rules of Halloween. Like they broke a lot of social contracts.
Right.
And I think hers probably not as much as some of the others that we end up seeing, but it was a good way to establish the groundwork that we are going to stick to these rules. We are going to hold people accountable for not honoring this day, which is actually kind of a holy day. We're
Right.
honoring the dead. Um, anyway, at least in my opinion, she deserved it.
Right. And I think, of course, being like Halloween lovers and scary movie lovers, and Doherty had expressed that he was like a super like
Oh yeah.
obsessed with Halloween and stuff. Like it's kind of like he's definitely connecting on that personal level with people exactly like him and like us, to where it's like he's like playing on it like, I know I'm like in this situation where like good she dies because she hates Halloween, like we
Yes.
don't want her in the rest of this movie anyways. And it's
No.
like people like us are watching like, yes, like good, yeah,
Go
get her
Sam.
out, yeah,
It is
yeah,
interesting. For most of it, I do cheer for Sam.
yes, same. And that's just that whole cute factor. I think it's like
Cute and again, justified, which we'll continue to get into.
right, right,
Um, and I think like I talked about Jaws when I said that we were talking about not actually seeing things, but maybe this scene is better compared to Psycho and the shower scene.
yes,
You never see a knife go in, you just see blood.
right,
And I think that plays also to Doherty's like, attention to the horror genre and what works and who he's honoring through this. And I think a lot of it is mostly John Carpenter, but you still get some other gems throughout. And I think that was a good Hitchcockian kill,
oh yeah,
if you ask me.
yes, for sure. I just love that he's a horror fan and a Halloween fan himself. That's
Yes.
it's just what makes, I think, the storyline since he wrote it so much better and how it was filmed so much better just because of that fact. Like if you're not a super horror fan, then I feel
You
like
might
you
miss
don't.
some things.
Yeah, yeah. And he pays, respect to all of those different movies, and it's artful.
Very, very. So that's when it goes into the comic book intro credit
Mhm.
rules, and we get all of the rules laid out for us. So we already have the first rule, which is don't let the jack-o'-lantern grow out. It will protect you. Second rule is always check your candy.
Mhm.
And third, wear a costume to disguise yourself as one of them. So,
Ooh. So
mm,
yes, always check your candy. It's kind of the perfect lead into the principal,
yes.
Mr.
Oh,
Wilkins.
yeah, Mr. Wilkins. Okay, did you notice that Billy, the trick or treater that walks up to Mr. Wilkins' porch and starts grabbing all the candy, even though it only says take one, he's not
Mhm.
following rules. He's dressed like Chucky. Just another fabulous
Uh,
detail.
yes, like it's like little things throughout the entire movie that he ties into, just little pieces here and
Amazing.
there. But yeah, if you don't look closely, like you will miss so many little references to
Yeah.
all of these different horror movies just across the board that are like classics.
Well, and then this is the classic. I mean, checking your candy, we know we don't really have to do that in real life, but in the trick or treat universe, you do because of people like Mr. Wilkins. And I think what's so tough about this is that he obviously knows Billy. He's, we find out later that he's principal at the local school, and he just sits down with him and talks to him. And it's not, I mean, I think Billy's a little weirded out because he got caught doing something he wasn't supposed to do.
Right.
Um,
And I just
but
laugh at the part when he's like, oh, like the knife, and he's like, oh, relax, it's not for you.
oh yeah, which
And
it,
it
it
wasn't
was
at that
later.
moment. At that moment, it wasn't. But
And the knife was not what Billy encountered. And that kill is really tough because it does kind of, so this part of the movie and another part of the movie does kind of break some of the rules of horror because you don't often see children die
yes,
in these movies.
that is, yeah, that's one of the funny things is like children are usually off limits, and there's very, very, very few horror movies that actually break that rule. And this is one of them where it breaks
Yeah.
it like
Well, there are very few
several times.
characters. Yeah, well, there are very few characters, including the children, who are likable and who are sympathetic. So when it all goes down to, it's pretty tough because there's a lot of vomiting.
Yeah.
And at first, it does just look like he's vomiting up chocolate. It's not until Wilkins picks him up and starts to carry him inside that you realize that it's blood,
Yeah.
because there's just a shit ton of blood all over his shirt. And you're like, oh, like this kid's dead.
Yeah, like that was, yeah, it was severe. And I think I saw that they actually made it out of chocolate syrup and like Caro syrup. So it
Yeah,
definitely looked very chocolatey. And at first you're watching, you're like, how much chocolate has he eaten tonight? Like,
I
God.
know, because the lighting is not that great in this
Yeah.
shot. Like
Yeah.
it really does just look like he's puking up Hershey's syrup.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you get inside, you realize, no, this kid's like
He's like dead, like
dead.
vomiting
And
blood at the end. They're dead. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure they showed a shot of a table and some of the, I think it was potassium chloride maybe, and well, it starts cyanide possibly, maybe. And I think cyanide might have actually been what that man put in his child's pixie stick. But still, like, to acknowledge that urban legend and acknowledge that that happened and then apply it to your story, it
Mhm.
just blows my mind how much thought goes into that.
It plays on the fear. So
Mhm.
parents who are watching this movie are going to be like, oh my God, like that's terrifying for me to think about that happening to my children. And then, you know, children watching this movie, I would have been able to watch it when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So children watching this movie are going to, you know, kind of probably, maybe it's a lesson for them too,
Right.
to be like, parents have to check my candy at the end of the night
Mhm.
before I can eat any of it. So we kind of get a glimpse at, or well, you don't really see Lori yet, but you just hear all of these girls changing in
Okay.
this
And this is
store.
where we actually see the little actor that plays Sam. He's the little boy with the lollipop that's peeking
Okay.
in on them in the dressing room.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, of course they would have to give him a little cameo of himself. So yeah.
Of course.
Yes,
And
the
this
little
is
boy.
also when we're revealed our like only person of color in the whole movie.
Love her because
Yeah.
she so her name's Rochelle, and she was in White Chicks. I'm assuming
She
you've
was?
yes.
I remember seeing that in
Her name is Rochelle, and she was in White Chicks. She was Denise Porter in White Chicks, the reporter that he goes on a date with. Yeah. So I was like, wait, I know her from something. I was like, IMDb, I have to figure out who she is. And I was like, yes, that's where she's from. And so yeah, she played Denise Porter in White Chicks. And her real name's Rochelle, and it's funny because she actually voiced a character in one of my favorite video games, Left 4 Dead 2, and the character's name in that is Rochelle too. So
Rochelle.
I was like, I'm gonna remember her name forever now. So I was
I love
like, oh, love finding these little tidbits. But so she's no stranger to horror, also in video
No.
games, because she's played a video game character in a zombie apocalypse. So, but yeah, yes, she is like literally the only person of color in the entire movie.
Yeah. Tough. That's tough.
Right.
And before we really go inside the costume store, that's when they start talking about the festival and Warren Valley, Ohio.
Yes.
And just by that name alone, it kind of makes me think it is in the greater Cincinnati area. So I'm going to choose to believe that.
That's fine with me. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, being in Southern Ohio, but like when I tell people, I'm like, yeah,
You're
I'm
close to
from
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. It feels like that, like a small town just outside of Cincinnati.
Mhm.
So which hits close to my
Oh.
heart because I'm in a small town outside of Cincinnati. So that's exactly what it looks like and it feels like throughout the
Yeah.
movie. So yeah, I live in that world too, that it's definitely near Cincinnati.
So we can totally relate to these characters better than anybody, especially
Yes.
Lori. So let's talk about Lori's reveal and just kind of the way that the stage is set for her.
Yeah. So of course they're, they all start coming out and they're dressed up as Bo Peep and Snow White and Cinderella. And
Mhm.
then so you're thinking like, okay, all
And
of
they're
these
sexy.
girls, yeah,
There's a lot
sexy.
of cleavage, a
Yes.
lot of leg.
Your typical sexy Halloween costumes. And then Lori steps out in a Red Riding Hood costume.
Which
Little
is
Red
also
Riding Hood.
sexy for a
Right.
Red Riding Hood costume, but she's clearly not feeling it.
And she's like, ugh, I like disappointed in the way she looks at him. Like, girl, you look fine. Like, it's probably cold outside. You're gonna be warm.
Got a
Yeah, no,
cloak.
it was a super cute costume, but she's not impressed. Of course, probably because she looks at. I'm assuming that it was her actual sister. That was her older sister was dressed up as Cinderella, and then the other two, and she was like, "You guys probably like
Right.
you guys look like this, and I'm covered up in a
Plus,
cloak."
they let us know in no uncertain terms that she's a virgin.
Yeah.
So, of course, she's dressed as a character that doesn't maybe inspire. I don't know why Bo Peep would, but maybe doesn't inspire a lot of that sexiness.
Right.
Whereas,
Right.
like, you know that the princesses, when they rode off on those stallions with their princes, were gonna go get banged later.
Right.
I mean,
And-
we all know that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, the others talk about how they go to these every year. You
Yeah.
hear them talking about it, and they're like, "Oh, like last year, and blah blah blah," and
And
talking
I
about how they
think
do
they
it every
mentioned
year.
going to different areas of the country every Halloween.
Yes, they said something about Florida, I think, because it was like Tampa, Florida, or something like Miami, or something like that. And then the other one was like, "No, it was 2 years ago because you threw up or something." Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it happens like in different places every year.
Yeah. Which,
For
when
them.
we get further into the movie, makes a lot of sense.
Right, right. So it's some of the stuff they say, it's like hilarious being somebody who's watched it already, so you know like what happens later on.
Yes. Like her being the runt of the litter.
Right, yes. Mom always said she was the runt of the litter, which actually happens like later in the story, but like one of them says, I had bad Mexican last year, or about throwing up, and like drops at that. And then the other one says something about, they say something about her taking a girl home. And she was like, it all tastes the same to me. And so
right. I missed that.
yeah. So they said something about her taking a girl home, and she was just kind of like, so they all taste the same to me. And you're kind of like, so the first time watcher is kind of thinking like, oh, they're just being vulgar, like
right,
that they've already been clocked by the mom of the little boy for being vulgar in there. So
I love that. Again, like there's so many things you can miss in this movie because there's so many great things happening.
Yes.
Like I knew they were foreshadowing, but it did not register with me until just now.
That's why you have to like watch it over and over because it's like you pick up on little things here and there.
Oh yeah.
Like just brand new things. And I think it took probably because I've watched it twice in the past week, and it was probably the second time that I picked up on that. I was like, I missed that the first time too.
Yeah.
It just doesn't click yet.
That comment is also the only LGBTQ friendly moment in the movie too.
So maybe
I wouldn't say it's not friendly to the LGBT community.
Right.
But it's not celebrating.
Right. And I think it was Rochelle that said it too. So it's funny that they made the one person of color in the entire movie also potentially LGBTQ.
So we got to check off all of our boxes with one character.
Right.
So we did the work.
Yes. Yeah. problematic, but
It was also the early 2000s.
yeah, I
And
was gonna
that's not
say,
an excuse, it's just an explanation.
right.
So at what point do we get back to Wilkins?
So it cuts to them for that little bit, and then they kind of, I know
They invite,
Cinderella flirts with the guy, the
yeah,
counter.
they invite him to Sheep's Meadow.
Yes, yes. So she invites him, and then I think they're outside, and they invite the two guys unloading the van or equipment, because I
Yes.
remember she says like,
They were the news
that's some,
broadcasting camera
yes,
crew.
yeah. She's like, that's some big equipment you have, and it's just
Oh
kind of
God.
like another
Big
like,
equipment you have.
yeah, what big
Another one. I
eyes
see
you
what you did
have.
there.
Yeah. Then I think that's when it switches back to Wilkins.
Mhm.
Right after that,
Is
and
that when he's in the backyard already?
yes, so he is digging a grave in his backyard.
Yes, because you have to hide the evidence.
Right. And it's revealed that there's actually another kid.
Mhm.
So he's burying two bodies, technically. He's burying two bodies. Just one body is not complete, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
And the kid basically starts making noises
Right.
and is still alive.
And in the greater timeline of the movie, it makes sense that Mr. Krieg comes out and is like, what the hell are you doing? Like, what's all this noise? Keep your damn kid out of my yard.
Yeah.
And that all comes back later in the movie, as we're going to continue to say throughout this entire thing.
Right. That's
But
another thing I love about that is just the constant time loops and
yeah,
that he shows, and it's like the first scene in the entire movie is actually one of the last scenes that actually
yes.
happens, so it's just mind-blowing because you're seeing everything in chronological order, and he plays with that a little bit. So
I love that too.
yes.
I think it makes the anthology of it all
Mhm.
that much better.
I think I read one person say like the best thing to compare it to isn't even a horror movie, but it's like Crash. If you've ever seen the movie Crash with Sandra Bullock, that was like the best kind of thing to relate it to. And I was like, yeah, that's probably the best, just because they do kind of switch back and forth, and you'll see like this happened later on. So I'm like, yeah, that's probably the best reference. So if you've ever watched Crash, then this is like the horror movie version of it. Only not really, but
that is an inopportune time for the other body. We don't know who this kid is.
Looks like clown costume on. Grabs his leg.
And to start making noise, because Mr. Krieg is now outside. The dog is involved and is barking because, as we find out later, there was something in Mr. Krieg's yard. And Mr. Krieg says, keep your damn kid out of the yard. And we do meet Wilkins' kid.
Yeah, that's when
we hate him, right? I do.
Oh, Daddy!
Oh. You're gonna come inside with me?
And not only do we hate him, but Wilkins hates him as well.
Yes.
Yes. Like, he is obviously very frustrated at life that he's had a child, because...
And he's a single dad.
Yeah.
Because he says an offhand comment, something about his mom dying. I have to wonder, how did she die?
Right.
Because as you look around his yard, there are a lot of I may be getting ahead of myself. He finishes burying this body and plants a tree.
Yep.
Which makes sense because you've got some fertilizer with two dead bodies underneath. But as it pans across the yard, you see a lot of young trees in the yard. So like when you catch that, you're like, oh, like it's not just these two kids on this one night. Like he's been doing this.
Yeah, and they hint to that again later on, with some of the statements made by him and Billy.
Yeah. Well, and at that point, he goes inside with Billy. And
yes.
And the tension there is so thick.
Yes.
Because
he hates his child.
Billy's being annoying. And you can tell he hates him, and he picks up this huge knife, the same knife, and tells Billy to go down to the basement. Mm-hmm. And Billy keeps talking about how we're going to carve this jack-o'-lantern.
I'm going to carve a scary face this time.
Ugh. So it's so slow and fluid, and like for a moment you're just like, oh, poor Billy, like he's about to get killed. He grabs Billy's, what seems to be Billy's head, and he's got the knife drawn, and then it goes into the skull, and it's not Billy.
No, it's just Charlie.
Yeah, it's the severed head of our little friend that was on the porch.
Yeah, it's just Charlie. It's not Billy. So I'm like, then I'm kind of like, okay, like, so does he really hate his kid that much if he's willing to kill all of these other kids but not his own? So
yeah, don't forget the eyes. So that also like led me to believe that maybe he's like passing down this knowledge because it was passed down to him.
So I was gonna bring that up because when he is talking to Charlie earlier, when Charlie's eating the poisoned candy, he brings up about how his dad taught him. Like he said,
That's
I used to be just like you, Charlie, but my dad instilled in me like these behaviors, and then that's
respect
when
the rules.
yes, and then that's when Charlie dies. So it's kind of like you come back, you're like, oh, like did his dad used to kill kids who broke the rules like he does? So, and then of course
And
he's
so that
teaching his
means,
son.
yeah, he's creating a future sociopath
Yes.
with a terrifying backstory because his mom's dead, and later some shit goes down with Mr. Wilkins. Then we go back to the festival at this point. And
Mhm.
before we do go back, Billy asks to go to the festival with his dad, and his dad says no because he has a date.
Oh, we never get to do anything fun.
Besides like carving up skulls,
Yeah. Kill kids together. Dang it.
That's not fun at all. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not, but Billy seemed to enjoy it.
I mean, they seem like they were having a blast. So carve up them child skulls.
Right. We're back to the festival, and it's just kind of panning around,
Mhm.
right? If you look in the background, you might see some familiar costumes milling about. And it is at this point where we go down the alley, which
And
is a shout out to the short film.
right.
There is an alley in the town square that Sam goes down, and it looks, I mean, as similar as it can.
Right.
That animated film was pretty minimalist, but I think you can tell it's the same flavor. It's dark, it's really long.
And it was definitely the full inspiration for this entire
sequence.
Yes.
So we have people making out like pretty intensely.
Yes, and the man, you can't really tell who he is because he has a mask and
I
a
keep
cloak.
calling him the man in black.
Yeah, that's a good descriptor for him.
Yeah.
You have this curly haired woman.
So they're making out intensely.
Mm-hmm.
I think she feels like she's like found the one.
Oh yeah, she's definitely
really
like she's getting that ring.
Yep, definitely. And then, but at some point she stops, and I can't remember if she said something about like going back to the festival or what, but it was stopping his groove.
Mm-hmm.
And he responds pretty immediately by kind of like slamming her again against the wall and then going back in to like make out with her a little bit. And then he starts to move his way down her neck. And then you see her face kind of change.
Yes.
It's no longer enjoyable or pleasurable.
I was gonna say, it goes from pleasure to pain real quick.
Real quick. And not the pain that is pleasurable
right.
at all. And that's, I think, when you see him come back and there's blood on his face.
Yes, and on her neck.
And on her neck.
Yep.
So he has bitten her.
Yeah. So
he has fangs.
We're like, oh, okay. So, and now we have vampires in this little story.
Again, such good timing for it to come out in 2009 because vampires were exploding in popularity.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So she runs away, as you do when a masked man bites you on the neck. And she runs back into the festival and she's trying to get people to help her, but she's like bleeding out, and she runs into our Grinch of Halloween.
Yes.
In her robot costume, and like kind of knocks into her, and they ignore her and just keep walking like, oh, she's drunk.
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
he says she's just drunk. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And then that's when she looks around and she sees people with blood splattered on them just the
Yes.
exact same. So you're like, nobody's gonna
Oh,
think that. And
exactly.
she can't verbalize what she's going through. So I'm like, girl, like,
No,
come on, just tell them, like, I've
no,
been
someone's
attacked. That's
after
all you have
you.
to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, someone's after me. Help me.
Yes.
We don't really see
What
what
happens?
happens to
Yeah.
her. We just see him prop her up and leave her there. And this was a point that I wanted to make, and it's something that my dad told me one year when I got in trouble on Halloween. I finished trick or treating with my friends. I think I was 13 or 14 at the time. And then I rode my bike, excuse me, to my friend's house without telling my dad, and then rode my bike back home after dark. And he was waiting for me when I got home, and he was livid. He's like, what were you thinking? I was like, nothing, like driving through my very boring and crime free town that we grew up in where nothing ever happens, just like I normally would any other day. And he was like, yeah, but this isn't any other day. Like, what do people wear on Halloween? They wear costumes, they wear masks. If somebody came out and grabbed you, you wouldn't know how to identify them. You'd say, oh, they were dressed in a Scream mask. Well, so were 50 other people tonight.
Right.
And I think that moment does a pretty good job of like hammering home that no, Halloween really isn't that safe. I mean, we talked about the poison candy. You can talk about fantastical creatures and demons coming to exact revenge when you don't follow the rules, but humans are actually monsters. And I think that, we've already seen that with Mr. Wilkins.
Mhm.
We see it later. And the way he leaves her also kind of goes into this thought of costumes. He just
Mhm.
leaves her to bleed out next to other drunk people
Right.
who
Yep.
are also
Sits her,
passed out
yep,
right
sits
next
her
to
down on that wall, shuts her eyes, and she just looks like a drunk, passed
blends
out
right in.
person.
Blends right in. So now we're getting to possibly one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Oh, yeah. If this isn't like your favorite little segment in the
I
movie,
don't know what's wrong with you.
like, it is the best. And it ties in more kids,
Mhm.
and it's
Oh, we
amazing.
did forget to mention one thing, is that when we met Laurie is named for none other than Laurie Strode
Mhm.
of John Carpenter's Halloween.
Perfect little nod there.
Perfect nod.
The
And I
most
say that
well-known scream
now.
queen, I think, so.
I know. She really is.
Mhm.
I say that because we're about to get another one. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so you got to stop me.
But
Thank you for watching the Be Very Afraid podcast Trick or Treat episode part 1. Part 2 will be coming out soon, so make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel. Feel free to follow us on our socials for any updates about future episodes. Make sure you check out our podcast on one of your favorite podcast platforms.